Well, Scott Peterson is in the news again, and James and we're going to talk about it on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. It's what some people are they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
First of all, let me take a moment to welcome all of the folks that are joining us tonight and inviting you, if you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube, to push that button to subscribe. That's really important for us in getting and launching our YouTube channel. Also, we want to encourage you that if you'd like to support the program, we're just getting a few housekeeping things out of the way. Then we invite you to go over to peacemakernetwork.com, peacemakernetwork.com. You can not only help support the program, but you can support those brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. That's peacemakernetwork.com. And last but not least, going over to our website, charliecrimebuster.com. There you can get caught up on a whole bunch of them. In fact, James, some time ago, quite a long time ago, we did something on Scott Peterson, and now he's back in the news again. And the interesting thing is, this crime happened some time ago, so there might be people that were not even born when that took place. For instance, if you were to Google Scott Peterson, you would find that there's a Scott Peterson that's an American journalist. There's even one who is an American book writer. And can believe it or not, there is a Scott Peterson who is a professional wrestler. And then there's a Scott Peterson who's a police officer. And there's one that's a golfer. But the guy we're talking about is an American salesman who was actually convicted of murder. His wife, it was on December the 24th, 2002, there in Modesto, California, and he had gone fishing, and he came home, and she was missing. But then sometime later, she went missing in December the 24th, 2002. On April of 2003, they discovered a body of a little baby, because when Lacey had gone missing, she was pregnant. And so they found a body of a baby, and then a few days later, they found her body. And so Scott Peterson was then arrested, charged with 2 counts of murder. In 2004, he was actually found guilty of first-degree murder of Lacey and second-degree murder of the infant. So that's kind of the story. That here's a guy, that went out fishing, came home, his wife was missing. And as you know, many times the husband is the suspect, and he became the suspect and actually was arrested and charged with first-degree murder.
Okay, so this is a story about a wife missing and a husband is charged, which happens all too often. We both can say that, right?
No doubt about that.
But what makes this case so significant?
Well, first of all, it was, it's that story you hear so often of the American family. Here was a nice-looking guy, beautiful woman. They had a house in the suburbs. Life was good for them. And this happened on Christmas Eve. And then, of course, what really happened, I think, that made it significant was that this was one of the few trials at that time that was actually broadcast on live TV. And so people were caught up on it, kind of like the O.J. Simpson trial,
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a whole lot of people. And this really, it took the country, and everybody in the country was talking about it, just like, we have just covered Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
Right.
As popular as that was, this was another one of those trials that just simply caught the attention of the country. That's a funny thing, isn't it? I'd say funny, but it's an interesting thing that, as you said, people go missing every day in this country. There's murders like this every day in this country. But what is it that really makes something go viral and catch the attention of the entire nation?
I know, right? It must be just the nature of the crime, I guess, and the fact that there was a child involved.
Yeah, there was a child involved, and again, I think the big thing though was back in that day when it happened back in the early 2000s. This was actually put on TV, and the trial was broadcast on television, and I think that really captured it. So I think that makes it significant that this was a crime that didn't just happen in a small city in California in a certain state, a certain time, and like any other one, this one caught the attention of the nation. And because it caught the attention of the nation, then we pretty well followed that story on through even to today, when there's a new news involved in that.
Well, I know when it first started off, he was like just a person of interest, and then all of a sudden he becomes a suspect. So how did that move happen?
Well, of course, anytime there's a crime taking place where there's a missing person, officers always look to the people that are closest to them. Mm-hmm. We think sometime erroneously in this country that when people are killed, there's some serial killer out there working, and suddenly that's the way the person's killed. Mm-hmm. But the majority of the time, people are killed by those people that are in their family circle or their friend circle. And so it's very, very natural that the police immediately begin to think about Scott Peterson as a person of interest. But what really turned this around was in January of 2003. She went missing December the 24th. But on January the 17th, then word got out that this husband who was missing his wife and going on TV and urging other people to help find her, that suddenly they found out that he had 2 previous extramarital relationships, affairs. Mm-hmm. And then they found out that he was at that very point having an extramarital affair with a lady by the name of Amber Frey. And she actually told the police that when she first met him, she said, well, he said that he was a widower, that his mm-hmm. wife had died. Mm-hmm. And so the police considered that that was an indication that Scott had already decided to kill Lacey. Right. And they even used her before he knew that the police knew about Amber Frey, this extramarital affair that he was having. They even used her to record him and to try to catch him up and try to find some information that would incriminate him. So it was a pretty interesting case that they were trying to to get him to say something that would incriminate him. And she had actually agreed to record her phone conversations with him in the hopes, of course, of getting him to confess. But he never did confess, by the way.
Right. But we know the outcome. We know that he was found guilty. But what was some of the evidence that they had against him?
Well, it was mainly a circumstantial trial, like a lot of these trials are. But what really, I think, broke the case was in April, after she had gone missing in December the 24th. In April, there was a guy that was walking his dog. Actually, a couple were walking their dog. And then they found the decomposing body of the male infant. His name was Connor because Lacey was pregnant at the time she went missing. And then a few days later, they found her body as well. But now get this. When he went fishing that day, he actually went several miles away to get into San Francisco Bay. Guess where they found her body?
San Francisco Bay.
San Francisco Bay. So when that happened, that was really strong evidence that they used in the trial. Also, there was a couple of other things. There was a hair that they found in Scott Peterson's boat that was consistent with his wife Lacey, and that was a big piece of evidence that they used. And the other one was they found some anchors that he had made for his boat. He said for his boat. And then they found a spot where it looked like an anchor had been set, but that anchor was not found there in his storage shed. So they're alleging then that he had actually made anchors ahead of time to weight down her body there. And so they use that as evidence as well. And also the fact, the circumstantial thing was he had told some people that he was going golfing when he actually went fishing. They add the extramarital affair to that. And then that was some of the evidence that they used to really bring it to the jury and actually got a guilty verdict.
when you're married and you have a spouse goes almost everywhere with you, especially like in your boat, wouldn't it be natural for her hair to be in the boat?
Well, what they brought out in the trial was that she had not been around that boat. That she had never been in the boat, never been in that storage shed where the boat was stored. He had a storage shed where he had a lot of his business stuff there. He was a national salesperson for a fertilizer company, and he had that storage center there, the storage shelter there,
Uh-huh.
and the boat was there. And basically, the prosecution said there was no reason for her hair to be in that boat because she had never been around the boat, never been in the storage. But now things have changed down the line, and we actually find that there was someone actually who said that they had seen her in that storage shed. But that's I'm getting ahead of myself on the story, I
Oh,
guess.
okay.
but at the time of the trial, they presented it that she had never been around the boat and she had never been in the shed.
Interesting. Well, then before we go any further, do you have a crazy crook story to share with us this week?
Boy, do I have a crazy crook story. Now, I thought that all the crazy crooks were in America, but unfortunately, it seems to be a worldwide epidemic. And this happened over in London, in England. And this guy by the name of Mr. Khan, he Khan Kaun, he ended up going to trial on a cocaine charge. But James, if you're going to go to trial and you're going to be tried for a cocaine charge, don't you think it would be a good idea not to bring cocaine with you to the court?
Yeah, that might be a good start.
Might be a good idea, but he actually had a bag with him, and of course, anybody who's been around courts now, that they search your bags when you're going into the court, and they actually found on this Mr. Khan, this idiot, there was 21 grams of cocaine found in that bag. Now, the amazing thing about all of this is the fact that when that happened, he actually was found not guilty of the charge that he was being charged on, but then he got charged for the cocaine that he was bringing there at that time.
Oh my goodness! Wow! So he was actually a true con. It was.
Yeah, pretty crazy, isn't it? Yeah, pretty doggone crazy. Yeah.
So back to Scott Peterson. What happened regarding the sentencing of Scott Peterson?
Well, on November the 12th, 2004, I believe it was, is they actually convicted him 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances for killing Lacey, second-degree murder for the fetus that she carried.
Mm-hmm.
And November the 30th, they started the penalty stage, and they actually, just like with Chad Daybell, they found him guilty and went ahead and gave him the death sentence. They sentenced him to death by lethal injection. And they also ordered him, interesting enough, ordered him to pay $10,000 toward the cost of Lacey's funeral. And they called that, of course, the murder cruel, uncaring, heartless, callous. And he was actually sentenced to death. But hold on, we're not quite through with that sentencing, because in June 2020, the Supreme Court heard arguments, and they basically said that some of the jurors on the jury was improperly excused. In other words, if they found somebody that did not believe in the death penalty, they would automatically excuse them from the jury. But the state law says that you can still keep that person on the jury if that person says, even though I don't believe in the death penalty, I will set aside my feelings and really look at it from a reasonable point of view. And if the crime fits the criteria for the death penalty, then I would vote for the death penalty. Mm-hmm. But they didn't give him that opportunity. They just said, if you don't believe in the death penalty, you're off the jury. So the Supreme Court comes back and says, well, there's not evidence here that would set aside the verdict, but there is certainly evidence that would set aside the sentence. So then they simply adjusted the sentence from death to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Well, now I understand he's been in contact with the LA Innocence Project. So what are they getting done in Scott's case?
Well, the LA, this was the thing that really shocked me. I mean, I followed the trial pretty well as I followed it, and I guess as most of the people in the country, I felt that he was guilty. And it shocked me that the LA Innocence Project took his case on, because usually, now keep in mind, this is not the National Innocent Project, this is the LA Innocent Project. But usually they will not take a case on unless they feel that there's really something sufficient for them to hang their hat on, that they could really successfully argue. So it certainly caught my attention that the LA Innocent Project decided that they were going to take this case on, because I think that they just don't, you just do that with a drop of the hat. They just don't take any case on. And so there were several things that they brought out in appealing to the court. One was the fact that there were numerous witnesses, now not just one, not just a person, but several people who had reported that they had seen Lacey in the park walking the dog while Scott was out fishing. Now, if she was in the park walking the dog during that time that he was on the lake fishing, or there in the bay fishing, then there's no way that he could have killed her according to what the prosecution said. It means that she was killed by somebody else, not Scott Peterson at that time. There was some other things. There was a break-in. There was actually a break-in in a house right across the street from the Petersons. And the LA Innocence Project, they brought up that fact, and that not very far from there, they found a van that was burned out. And in that van, there was a mattress, and there was actually blood on that mattress. Now, the police never really brought that into the trial. They never really followed those leads to tie it to perhaps the disappearance of Lacey. Now, well, you get back and you're saying, well, so what? I mean, what are the chances that her body would be found in the San Francisco Bay where he was fishing? That seemed to be a big problem with this case. But keep in mind that this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, why this became such a significant crime. The word was out all over the country about this, and it had been reported that he was in the San Francisco Bay fishing. So if there was, now I'm just playing devil's advocate here, if there was a break-in at a house across from her, she had already been seen set in the park, and she came upon these people breaking in this house, and they went ahead and took her and kidnapped her and still had her body, then they would know that he had said that he had been on the bay. So it would be very smart for whoever had kidnapped her to take her body to the San Francisco Bay and then dispose of the body.
Because it was 7 days before she was found. That makes
that would give them an opportunity to put the crime back on the husband. So the LA Innocence Project, they wanted to see if they could get the court with new evidence, to test the mattress to see if that blood had DNA on it, because DNA has advanced so much since the early 2000s. So they thought they could find DNA there. However, unfortunately for him, the court did not agree to test the mattress, but they did agree to test for DNA with one spot of DNA that was found on Lacey's jeans. And that's something else they wanted them to test. Now, here's the thing, James. If they test that and it does come back that someone else's DNA is on her jeans where they found her body, then this is a new ball game. That can open up this whole thing. He could have a new trial. He could go back, and then maybe at that point they'll test other things and may find other things that actually shows that Scott Peterson is innocent. So
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty huge news, and you got to think about this. The fact that the LA, and I heard somebody say this, and I thought it was a really good way to verbalize it. For Scott Peterson, for the LA Innocence Project to take this on was a dream come true for him, because he
Mm-hmm.
had been trying to get appeal after appeal after appeal. But
Right.
when you get the LA Innocence Project before it, it turbocharges your efforts.
Right.
But unfortunately, you got to think about the victim as well and the victim's family. While it was a dream come true for Scott Peterson, no doubt it's a nightmare for
Exactly.
Lacey's family and what they're facing. So
There,
there's good news for the suspect or the uh, convicted felon, and there's bad news for the family. So
right.
it's going to be really interesting what happens if they do find someone else's DNA on her as they go and test this. Then I think there's a good possibility that the verdict will be set aside in a new trial.
I agree. I agree. And they said that that DNA that they did find was on her pants. Was it
Yeah, on her pants. It was on her body somewhere. Now there was actually 17 items, and this is really
what did the
overwhelming
court
to me.
allow when they first accused him? What did they allow at all the first time?
Well, they didn't put any of this together the first time. I mean, they did not. The investigation, once they found out that he had that affair, they pretty well just developed tunnel vision right toward him.
Wow.
They were saying that the break-in happened a day or two later after this, but others have come back and said no, it happened on that very day. The van was just something that happened that wouldn't relate to the case, and so as often sometimes, unfortunately, and I'm a retired police officer, and I've probably been guilty of it as well. Sometimes you just develop tunnel vision. You think you got your man, you
Yep.
think you got the guy, and you just zero in and trying to find all the evidence that you can. The thing that's unsettling about this is that a whole lot, as you know, of the evidence against him is circumstantial evidence.
Right.
Now, people can be convicted on circumstantial evidence, but circumstantial evidence is not as solid as other evidence. And to me, it is kind of it's well, I was looking at there was actually 11 items that they really wanted to get them to test, and it was items that was found when they were breaking into that home and this sort of thing, and 4 items was actually attached to that orange van, and this sort of thing. And then there was the evidence by the eyewitnesses who saw Lacey Peterson walking in the neighborhood after he had left. I mean, that's some pretty compelling stuff to look at.
I mean, my concern about in this particular case, the fact that you can be sentenced to death based upon circumstantial evidence. That's a scary thought when you think about it.
It is a scary thought, but if you think back to our last case, with Chad, look, most all of that was circumstantial evidence, with them.
Well, it was the digital information was overwhelming. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, you
so
got that.
you had
Yeah.
you had the smoking shovel, as we say.
But I would say this, James, that unfortunately, a majority of cases really are won by circumstantial evidence, and I've heard lawyers illustrate this. Let's say, for instance, that we're going to bed at night, and the forecast says that it's going to snow, and we sleep. We go to bed before the snow comes. We get up in the morning, and suddenly there's 5 inches of snow on the ground. Now, I don't think we're going to see that in Florida. Do you?
No.
but in other places in the country, they
Sure,
see that
sure.
snow out there. Now, you didn't see the snow fall. You
Right.
you weren't there when it fell,
Right.
but circumstances lead you to believe that it snowed. So I mean, we circumstances does really impact our reasoning, and there was a lot of circumstances with this. I would tell you right now that based on what I've seen about the Scott Peterson case, I got to tell you, I still think he did it. Now, if they come back and they find any DNA at all that's introduced that's from someone else on it, then I might change my mind on that. But even with DNA, though, there's a such thing called touch DNA today.
Right.
Where you can, when you and I walk into a room, we bring our DNA with us.
We do.
It comes out as we speak. It comes out the things we touch. But I do think that if they find some foreign DNA that's not Scott Peterson's attached to that, then they should take a look at all this other stuff. Now, the other thing, people think, well, why don't they just go ahead and test it all? Well, it's very expensive to test all that, and unfortunately, it's really hard to turn a verdict around, even when you have sometimes evidence that speaks to the other part of it. But it's going to be interesting, I think. Don't you?
It is interesting, but going back to this thing with the DNA and the fact that it was his wife, if it's his DNA on his wife, wouldn't that make sense though? I mean, think about it. I mean, I'm sure there's DNA on my wife now.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind that if his DNA is on her pants or on her body or anything that they check, that's not going to change the case, because he's already convicted, right? I mean, that's not going to change at all. The only thing that's going to change the case is if someone else's DNA is there.
I see.
If they find his DNA, what are they going to do? Well, we're going to sentence you to life without parole. He already has life without parole, right?
Well, I mean, now that we're on the topic, let's just talk about that for a second. What happens if it is overturned because there is DNA on someone else's DNA on whatever they found on her genes?
Well, several things can happen. Number one, that might open up the court to being a little more lenient to test other evidence that they would like to get tested. It may even overturn the verdict. It might be enough evidence that they overturn the verdict, and if they overturn the verdict, then the prosecution has an opportunity to retry him, and they can decide to retry or not retry. I would think with something as high profile as this, I would say that they would probably retry him, and then they would go at it again. But this time, his attorneys would have this other evidence to bring into the trial that could, I believe, very well make reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury.
So you're telling me that he could actually experience double jeopardy even though he was found guilty the first time?
Well, it wouldn't be double jeopardy because that particular sentence is set aside. So he's not. If it's set aside, it's as though it never happened. So they got to go and try it again. Now, if he had been found not guilty, that's where double jeopardy. You can't come back again and say, that try him again because he's not guilty. But you can try him again if he's found guilty and the verdict is set aside.
Okay. Because I wanted to make certain that our audience understands how that works.
Yeah. The double jeopardy is basically sets in when somebody is found not guilty. If they're found not guilty, then you can't try them for the same crime. Now you can find something within that crime that is new to try them on, but you can't try them on that exact crime because he's already been, declared not guilty. That's where double jeopardy comes in, but it doesn't come in the fact if they find that there's new evidence for them to set aside this verdict, then they can certainly have every right to try him again on the same crime. Only it's going to be a tougher thing to prove to the jury, I think, with this new evidence.
Okay. All right.
So some interesting things, right?
Right. So what's coming up in our future podcasts we have going on?
Well, we've got several things, James, that we're looking at right now. We're looking at, of course, the Rust trial.
Right.
I know that's going to be coming right down the park, and then also we have, of course, Lori Vallow's trial that we just talked about last week. So we're going to be talking about that quite a bit. Then down the road here, we're going to have the Kohlberger trial with the killing of the Idaho college students. And So there's, unfortunately, in our business, there's always a lot of crime, and
That's right.
lots of things to talk about.
Sad but true, but yes.
Yep. Yeah, I would like to say, James, before we leave, that if anybody has questions or suggestions about maybe some of the things they'd like to see us cover, we'd like for them to go to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com and let us know. They can ask questions, make suggestions. As we say, they can even lodge objections. They may disagree with some stuff we say. There's a safe place for them to do so. So until next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep, for the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com, or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.